lesson, I'll describe how and why situating in action learning challenges conventional means of producing knowledge about the city. I'll explain peculiar tools inherent to this approach. Urban design and planning are commonly understood as interventions conceived from above. Plans, programs, and urban policies are designed on different scales by one or more experts who analyze problems and recommend solutions. Often, analysis is also developed through secondary sources such as statistical data, technical maps, photographs, documents, and so on. This methodology assumes that the city is made up of physical spaces and formal aspects, which can be shaped and designed through this approach. On the contrary, if we consider the territory as a palimpsest made up by different signs not only related to the morphology, we have to include elements which refer to material and immaterial aspects, such as space uses, perceptions, rules, traces, imaginations, powers, and so on. For this reason, it is also crucial to understand intangible and non-visible aspects of the context, such as general atmosphere, sound and visual qualities, sign of political tensions, daily challenges and desires. To capture this complexity, which is specific to contemporary cities, we have to change the point of view and lower the perspective to the local situation. We have to shift from a bird's-eye view to ground level. Moreover, we have to consider the city as a platform, a complex environment made up by various interacting components, actors, visions, projects. This entails a shift from the idea of a local context as an object of study to the idea of a local context as a place of social interaction, a place where we can build a co-design path to better understand social and urban change. This concept suggests the need to redefine the rules of interaction between experts and the city, traditionally a one-way relationship, in order to build new forms of interplay. So, how can we build this relationship differently? We can practice a situated approach, which implies an interplay between research, design, and the city. This approach is local and contingent, and it could be used in an action learning project. What do we mean by contingent? Karvonen and VanEur describe contingency as a circumstance which is shaped in the here and now, defining a collective process of learning which is related to specific dynamics, facts, and relationships. This process is not a static activity to produce knowledge. Indeed, situating does not entail a predetermined sequence of activities. Rather, knowledge changes and evolves during the process through different forms of exchange, accumulation, and leftover. In this process, the interaction is central. It is not only the addition of knowledge acquired individually, and not just a coherent body of cumulative knowledge. In a situated approach, also corporate perception, relation, and listening are fundamental, and not only rational learning is relevant. Situating implies familiarizing with people and spaces in an informal and spontaneous way, fostering relationships, listening to personal stories, and observing social practices. Learning takes place not as a process of accumulating information or undertaking sophisticated exercises of description. As argued by Ingold, learning takes place through a form of correspondence in which research materials and questions emerge from the field. In this perspective, learning has a holistic connotation, which involves knowledge but is not only cognitive and linear. In this way, it embodies a transformation of knowledge, perception, and self. Situating is an exchange process. But in this approach, what do we mainly exchange? We share different types of knowledge produced by experts, policymakers, grassroots organizations, social workers, and inhabitants. This suggests a kind of circular process in which knowledge is refined and in which there is no difference between scientific and common knowledge. On the contrary, there is an exchange, and the roles of recipient and giver are not pre-established. A situated experience turns the learning process into a daily and direct experience of the context. Attending a place for a long time gives continuity to observation and relationships building activities, and it allows researchers and planners to plunge into the everyday life. Through a daily interaction, you can foster the interest and the trust of inhabitants, allowing the interplay with different populations and components of the community, dealing with a variety of identities, cultures, ways of living, expectations and values. There are different tools useful to develop a situated approach. I want to suggest some of these to collect individual or collective perspectives on the ground. We can collect our feelings, and by our, I mean researchers, students and experts. First, we can experience the context by approaching the place, for example through site visits or walks, on your own or guided ones. Second, we can have conversations with the local people, for example through informal dialogues, small talks and front door listening. Third, we can get in contact with the local associations and groups, for example understanding and mapping local networks, taking part in their meetings and events, and participating in the life of groups. On the other hand, we can gather inhabitants and local actors' point of view in different ways. For example, through one-to-one interviews and in-depth dialogue with the key local actors or residents. This is important in order to understand the specific perspectives of grassroots organizations, NGOs, and local authorities. You can also arrange convivial and informal chats in order to collect personal stories, expectations, and needs. You can map desires and everyday life practices or discuss cohabitation practices together. All these are listening activities that you can organize involving fragile target groups. Lastly, you can share visions about present and future conditions through a structured activity, for example through workshops and focus groups. In some cases, situating implies an exchange process which leads to co-producing transformations of spaces in a temporary or permanent way. The space becomes the device to reinforce relationships and the sense of belonging. In the case studies Mapping San Siro, this dimension is central and allows us to experiment a very engaged and transformative situated approach.